Councillor Miller. We do see Hi, Judy. It's Kristen. We just want to check your microphone to make sure we can hear it. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear
Okay,
you. Can you
perfect.
hear me? Do I have to be on video?
Once the meeting starts, you should, but you can turn it off for now.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Oh, there's Rick. Hi, Councillor Miller. It's Kristen.
Councillor Miller, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm just going to go ahead and remute you then.
So Mayor says that we're good to go whenever you are.
Okay. All right. Welcome, folks. And good to see everybody on the Zoom platform for the next meeting of council. And good afternoon. Welcome to regular meeting of council and general committee for Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020. We begin this gathering by acknowledging the land in which we gather is the traditional territory of Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. And today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Acknowledging this reminds us of our great standard of living and is directly related to the resources and friendship of our Indigenous people. Before we begin, I'd like to have an extended moment of silence to remember the victims of Portapique and across Nova Scotia who were lost to terrible violence that took place on Saturday, including RCMP Constable Heidi Stevenson. Also, we remember the town councillor Mike Kiofi, who from Pelham passed away last week, as well as one of our own team members, Steve Stone. Steve was a hardworking employee, proud of his crew and his city, and a great friend to many people, including myself. He will be greatly missed. And on behalf of the City of St. Catharines and City Council, our thoughts and prayers go out to Steve's wife, Helen, his family, friends, and his crew. So now we can have an extended moment of silence. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. So tomorrow is the beginning of Ramadan, and for our Muslim community, we wish to be, on behalf of City Council, a wonderful and blessed Ramadan and Ramadan Mubarak to all of the Muslims here in our community. And we ask that those who are taking part in Ramadan continue to follow the directions of public health, which is to stay home and stay safe. And just like we're seeing across our community, so many people in St. Catharines, Niagara, have come together to embrace this initiative as we push back against COVID-19. April is also Volunteer Appreciation Month, and while we cannot be together to celebrate like we usually do, I want to commend all of the volunteers of our community. So many community organizations depend on the volunteers each and every day, and in this unprecedented time, even more of you have stepped up. Our community would not be what it is today without our volunteers who share their time, talent, and treasure. In the weeks ahead, we will be profiling many of the community volunteers on our social media channels to shine a light on so many of you. And I just want to say, on behalf of City of St. Catharines, thank you. And I know all of our city councilors who have been able to come out to the Volunteer Appreciation Dinner will be missing that, but they will be extending their thanks to the volunteers of our community as well through their different networks and social media channels. Today is also Earth Day in our city, and the city is celebrating Earth Day at home with easy initiatives to do alone or with your family. Visit stcatharines.ca for eco-friendly crafts, projects, and gardening tips. Do something special on Earth Day. This is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, but do something every single day to make our world a better place and protect our Earth. And so it's something that we can all do. And as we come out of this into a new norm, let's be mindful that we need to continue to protect the Earth and all that it provides for us. And Ed Bertinsky he's a person who was born and raised in our city. He has a piece in the Globe and Mail today that also features some of his artwork that he's been taken as part of his journey in making sure capturing the Earth as well. So check out that. Poetry is also, the Poetry Challenge is also happening now. So the annual Mayor's Poetry Challenge, calling on St. Catharines residents to stir up your creativity and write a poem on the theme Always Together. Help us share messages of hope and endurance about staying connected while staying physically apart. And you could submit your poems to poetry@stcatharines.ca by May 1st. You've heard a lot of the reminders, and a lot of the councillors have been out on their different networks and social media channels talking about the efforts to push back at COVID-19. We've seen a lot of the positive signs in the curve. The curve is being pushed down. It's pushing towards flattening, but we still have a lot of work ahead of us as we've seen some of the outbreaks that have taken place in the long-term care facilities here in Niagara, as well as some of the outbreaks that took place at the hospital. So we continue to urge people to not gather with more than 5 people. Stay home and stay safe when you can. Avoid parks, playgrounds, beaches, and sports fields. Go to grocery shopping only when you need it. And you must self-isolate for 14 days if you're returning from travel. The city has done an amazing job. Our City of St. Catharines has really stepped up. Every department is playing a role, and I'm going to turn it over to our CAO when it comes to the COVID update. But I just want to say on behalf of the City Council, thank you to the city staff for all the work that they're doing. We're going to be working towards a new normal, but to get there, we're going to need a lot of people to be participating. And I'm a strong believer we're going to get to a better place. Just want some clarification around landscaping. With spring weather here, although with the snow that came out today, it's kind of questionable about the spring weather. There are questions about lawn maintenance and essential and non-essential services. City staff have reviewed the provincial directives and working together with NAG region municipalities have agreed that essential lawn maintenance work can continue. This includes cutting grass and spraying for weeds and pest control. Cutting grass in parks and sports fields allows the city to control weeds, overgrowth, and ticks, and to bring those fields back as quickly as possible when we return to a new normal. Municipal staff will be out working in public parks, trails, cutting grass, and be mindful. This is also in an effort to push back at the number of ticks in our community, in our landscaped areas. So they're doing a lot of work out there that you're going to see. And for councillors, if you have any questions, please reach out to the CAO, and she'll be able to provide further information. But those who are in the business of lawn maintenance can get out there and cut grass and spray for weeds and pest control. Just want to say thank you to all the staff that are continuing to work to provide essential services here in our community, including the bus drivers. I also want to say thank you to the healthcare providers, frontline workers and grocery stores, pharmacies, essential services, everyone who's working around the clock. I also want to say thank you to the teachers who are finding innovative ways to connect with their students and provide support. And that includes Councillor Williamson and Councillor Cisco for really taking on different initiatives when it comes to online learning. I want to thank the businesses in our community who are stepping up. I want to thank Electra for donating $20,000 to community care. And I want to acknowledge Councillor Harris's effort in making that happen. Also to Joe from Heart of Niagara Hospitalities and Santonio from Impact Promotions for their development of a t-shirt called Our Heroes, of which the funds go to the Niagara Health Foundation. Rankin Construction donating masks, Johnny Rocco's donating pizzas, Lori McDonald at Provisions donating jams, Itty Bitty Buy Company donating food to the Dream Center, Niagara Industrial Association donating $110,000 to purchase ventilators. The United Way has launched a matching campaign of $100,000 from the Brown Homestead and Home Unique Foundation. And this is going to be dedicated to emergency response funds to be matched to support local charities. There's a lot of great things that are coming out of the situation that we're in, the crisis that we're facing. And I just wanted to say thank you and acknowledge that. We have the adoption of the agendas. And I will look to the clerk as there's just a couple of amendments that she'd like to make.
So the following amendment has been made to your agenda. Council agenda item 10.2, a motion to add a special in-camera meeting, has been removed from the agenda. This meeting is not required at this time, so we will update councilors' calendar shortly on this as well. There's 4 items of additional correspondence that have been placed in council sugar sink folder. First is AMO watch file sent April 16th, 2020. Second is a response from Premier Ford regarding business owners in St. Catharines. Third, a response from Treasury Board Secretariat regarding Ontario Jobs Recovery Committee. And finally, a memorandum from Niagara Region Public Works regarding recent changes to Niagara Region's waste management services and programs as a result of COVID-19.
Any other amendments to the agenda? I'll switch screens, see if there's any. Councillor Garcia.
Mr. Mayor, I just had a question on something you said in your report. Is that appropriate to do it now, or?
What's it about, Councillor?
About landscaping. I was going to suggest that perhaps we should be issuing a media release confirming what is allowed, because I had a landscaper that contacted me, and I contacted the municipal works, and I heard from him and the clerk, and I think the message was different in terms of what was allowed. So I think it's important that people who make a living as landscapers know that they can continue to do those essential services.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Councillor. So that'll come up under the CAO's COVID-19 update, and she'll clarify that. Now, that directive was just issued yesterday, Councillor, so I don't know when you were in contact with the landscaper, but as of yesterday, the directive was updated.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that, Councillor Garcia. And if there's no other amendments, Councillor Phillips, you have the motion to adopt the agenda?
Yes, so moved.
Councillor Dodge, you have seconded it? Okay. is Councillor Dodge. I'll look to Evan if you can unmute.
Oops.
There you go.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Dodge. Okay, is anyone opposed? I'm just going to go with anyone opposed. If no one's opposed, then it's carried. Has to be a majority opposed anyway. So that's carried. Look to the deputy clerk to read the items on the consent agenda. Or did I jump?
You
I
did.
jumped too far. Sorry.
We're going to go to declarations of interest next.
Yeah, I pulled one page off too quick.
That's okay.
Any conflicts of interest on this meeting? Okay, seeing none. Adoption of the minutes. Councillor Sorrento, I have you for the adoption of council minutes for the meeting held on Wednesday, April 8th, 2020, and that council adopt the minutes of the general committee meeting held on Wednesday, April 8th, 2020. Councillor Sorrento, you have the adoption?
Yes, so moved, Mr. Mayor.
And seconded by Councillor Townsend?
Yes, second.
Okay. Anyone opposed? Okay, seeing none, that's carried. We will now resolve into general committee. The following has been requested to be moved from consent to discussion. Item 2.2, planning, building services, planning services design review panel pilot project. That's 3 Ps in a row review and final recommendation by Councillor Kushner. And so I have a motion to remove the remaining reports on consent. That council approve the consent agenda, save and accept for those items brought forward for discussion forthwith. And moving to the motion to approve the consent agenda, I have Councillor Townsend.
Yes, moved.
Okay. And I'll look to the deputy clerk to call the question.
Today's consent agenda includes item 2.1, financial management services, annual investment report as at December 31st, 2019. Item 2.3, planning and building services, amendment to simplified meeting procedures to permit electronic participation from the St. Catharines Heritage Permit Advisory Committee during emergency. Item 2.4, planning and building services, amendment to the Committee of Adjustment procedural bylaw number 99399 to permit electronic participation during an emergency. And item 2.5, legal and clerk services, council correspondence. Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Cisco,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes,
and Mayor Sensik,
Yes.
and that's carried.
Okay, thank you, Council, for that. There is no, council's reconvened. There is no public meeting pursuant to the Planning Act. We will now resolve into general committee. On the first item for discussion 3.1, I call upon the CAO, Shelley Chemnitz, to provide an overview of the staff initiatives for COVID-19.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. Officially, by my count, we're in week 6 of our emergency activation due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And during these 6 weeks, many things have changed. Conversely, some have not changed. So we'll spend a little bit of time summarizing and talking about that today. In general, for staff, we can think of our work in terms of 3 main phases as we journey through this pandemic. First, it was the contraction of our services to only those that were essential. Secondly, the maintenance and or revision period of the essential service level, which is partially where we are today. And following that, the recovery period where we ramp our services back up again. It would be lovely if these 3 phases each existed separately, one at a time for the whole corporation, and that each one had a definitively prescribed beginning and end date, but that's not the case. It's part of the challenge that we're working through today. In the early days, we were much consumed with contracting the city's services down to only those essential. But at the same time, as we were contracting services, we were proactively preparing for future states of maintenance and eventually recovery. So basically, each week we're working on the phase we're in with special focuses and priorities that come with it, but also work is ongoing concurrently preparing for future phases. Throughout all this change, we have had a number of constants. Our 4 guiding objectives being the first one. We will use them to help us find balance in recovery just as much as we use them to find balance in the contraction of our services. They remain relevant and continue to guide us and are the reason you see a differently structured report before you today. The significant amount of uncertainty of what lies ahead is another constant. Even now, when we see light and the beginnings of the curve flattening, there remains uncertainty as to the length, duration, and specific movement back to full services. We continue to work through that as we have throughout the pandemic. That brings me to the final constant that I'd like to mention today, and that's the experience, dedication, and motivation of our staff to see this through and to ensure we can successfully plan a secure path forward to a healthy and strong community. They're working hard, and I have every confidence that they will successfully see us through. All of us get tired at times, but then we attend a meeting like we had yesterday afternoon, where we kicked off the larger staff group planning for recovery, and I get energized again. Our staff are a real source of inspiration to me personally, and I hope to the community and to yourselves as well. We're also very thankful for the strong support that the mayor and council have provided to us. Council has been very active in passing forward concerns that they hear from the community, and we're working through each one to ensure that we have everything covered. So I have a few items from the report I'd like to highlight for you today. As I mentioned already, this report is now structured around our municipal emergency control group objectives. Some items, of course, straddle various objectives, and that is what the balance we're trying to work is about, but we've sorted them out the best we can. So you see at the beginning of the report, the four objectives, that of providing essential services, safety and security of public and staff, continuing to support our partners in Niagara Health, Public Health, Niagara Region, and others, and ensuring that we remain in a financially stable condition during the pandemic. Regarding providing essential services, not only do we have to follow what the province determines as essential, we also seek to apply the intent of the directives when we evaluate our own activities, our financial limits, and the impact either could have down the road. We continue to have staff focused on educating and enforcing those provincial orders and educating the public on what services the city is still able to offer and clear confusion among those objectives. We've already heard about the landscaping initiatives and changes and modifications to interpreting of those orders. And we encourage everyone to continue to look at the city website, connect in with city staff to see as we go through those. We have posted a new frequently asked questions page and hope that that covers things. And as you go through your days, if you find there's something missing, please connect in and we'll seek to update where we can. The report contains some specific information regarding essential services. We talk about council advisory and task force meetings. Staff liaisons are reviewing any time-sensitive needs of advisory committees or work that aligns with essential businesses to determine the need for committees to meet. Two of them were included in today's agenda, and we'll make further recommendations in May if electronic meeting provisions need to be extended to additional committees. It's a phased approach to help us effectively manage our staff resources during this time. And as such, we're only recommending committees if they're addressing time-sensitive items or needs related to essential businesses. You see a section about fireworks, following guidelines in assessing essential services and limits to public gatherings. St. Catharines Fire Services will not be issuing consumer fireworks sales permits or display firework permits during the state of emergency. And as we progress through recovery, we will evaluate this decision, balancing it with our 4 objectives. For bylaw enforcement, our city bylaw officers are front and center in the enforcement initiative regarding the provincial orders, working together with the NRP as well as the region to ensure that public concerns are addressed and we keep a high level of compliance within our community. Total number of complaints we've processed through is just over 360. The majority regarding non-essential business and public gatherings in neighborhoods, parks, trails, and schoolyards. And to date, primarily it has been an educational campaign with no tickets issued. The closure of recreational amenities continues to be an area of concern for citizens. The province provided us some clarification to OREG 10420 and indicated that individuals may continue to walk through and use areas that are not otherwise prohibited from use. For example, to exercise or walk pets, still maintaining a safe physical distance and not to engage in organized public event or social gatherings of more than 5. Outdoor amenities such as playgrounds, picnic sites, benches, and shelters are prohibited from entry or use. To help all of us navigate through this, as I mentioned earlier, we've attached to the council report and it's available on the city website and FAQ document. It tries to cover many of the questions that we have got over time. Regarding recovery planning, as I mentioned earlier, internal individual divisions within the corporation have been giving thought and planning to recovery almost from the beginning of the closures. Recently, we've escalated this function to a corporate team so that we can share best practices and ideas across the corporation and to also ensure consistency in our approach through the corporation. This team is being co-led by Phil Christie and Brian York, with Dave Oakes and I strongly supporting their efforts, as does the rest of senior leadership team. The team contains staff from all departments, and we're excited to work with them. The mandate of the team is to develop and formalize arrangements for the effective management of the recovery process. They'll focus on addressing economic, organization, and psychosocial support to assist all our divisions to return to operations as quickly as is safely possible. The decisions that we will be making are definitely very complex. Flipping the switch from off to on is not really a possibility. The health threat of the pandemic won't be definitively ending on one specific day, next week, or next month. Our decisions need to carefully consider the advice of our health professionals, expressed needs within the community and community partners that we work with, as well as our staffing resources and physical space resources. A lot of consultation and consideration needs to be there for all of the needs, and it's going to be a balancing act for sure. As an example, to help you understand, Team SDC is currently working with Niagara Region Public Health Unit and the Farmers Market Vendors Association to put plans in place that will allow the St. Catharines Farmers Market to reopen. The safety of the public, the vendors, and our staff are paramount, and we're working through ideas that will help us reopen the market in a safe manner. We're aware that many people depend on the farmers market as a source of food and income, and we're looking forward to the market reopening sometime in May. The balancing act of the municipal emergency control group objectives apply here just as much as they did for the closures. So regarding our second objective of safety and security for the public, the control group has continued to ensure the safety of city staff and public are a priority. We've maintained ongoing communication with public and staff, and I've been sending staff emails at least once a week, and communication department has done an excellent job communicating information to the public, working with area municipalities, other communication teams, and our stakeholders, other stakeholders such as Brock. In the midst of our pandemic planning work, we also have an alternate risk assessment team. This team consists of reps from multiple departments and completes weekly threat and risk assessments on other natural hazards such as flooding and significant weather events. This will increase our city's resilience to other hazards during this pandemic and ensure staff continue to take proactive measures such as placing sandbags around the carousel and other city assets in Lakeside Park to protect against Lake Ontario's rising water levels. Our report also contains information regarding work in our departments, in particular the CRCS department, to engage their customers in a virtual space. Community engagement continues, virtual programming from our recreation staff, museum staff, Morningstar Mill staff. I also wanted to draw your attention to our leaders in our Innovate STC group. Very early in the crisis, they pulled the staff team together to develop and implement innovative ideas to safely keep our community active and engaged during our facility closures. You can see their work in the various activity challenges we sent out through social media channels, regular telephone calls to the Older Adult Center members, and our participation in the Senior Centers Without Walls initiative. I think it's important to note that this group met on March 19th. In week 1, and we continue to see their impact today as we sit in week 6. Regarding our third objective, supporting our partners, staff in all areas have remained engaged with a wide variety of partners. Our CMC has connected with other area CMCs, regional police, public health, Brock, and other stakeholders. Our economic development department has done an excellent job of working together with area businesses, supporting them in this very difficult time. I know myself and the mayor have remained in close contact with area CEOs and mayors to ensure where possible, we're taking a unified approach again across all the municipalities in Niagara. Dave Oakes and Daryl Smith have been working with Niagara Region Community Services to secure outreach support specifically for the city, our city. Municipal staff will be able to work directly with outreach workers when dealing with the encampments throughout the city. And we also remain committed to helping and working together with our boards and commissions, Library Transit, Meridian Centre, and First Ontario Performing Arts Centre. At this time, I will pass the discussion over to our treasurer, Christine Douglas, to talk about the financially stable fourth objective.
Thank you, CIO Chemnitz. The finance staff continue to monitor and quantify the financial impacts of COVID-2019 and the operational impacts they have. The estimated financial impact provided at the April 8th council meeting remains the current best estimate, as it is highly speculative task at this time, given the uncertainty with respect to the longevity and the severity of COVID-19 and the resulting impacts on the globe, national, and the local economy, including the city's finances. The city has taken several steps to reduce the financial impact of COVID-19. Some of these steps include communication being sent to all department heads, managers, supervisors, and administrative support staff to reduce discretionary spending across all budgets. This includes non-essential professional development and training of staff, office supplies, travel, and deferral of certain capital projects. Staff are also reviewing the ability to offset the shortfall through reducing contributions to capital projects and reserves, and to use the Tax Stabilization Reserve Fund. Staff have been exploring all opportunities for financial assistance from the senior levels of government through our economic development team and our government relations officer. Deferral of recruitment of a large number of vacant seasonal staff positions until further notice. Municipal Works has halted all maintenance contracts for roads, utilities, forestry, and parks, and workforce reductions of part-time and staff have occurred. We are also reviewing our essential and non-essential delivery. The COVID-2019 may create some other unexpected savings across multiple departments, which include fuel in the short and medium term due to the world oil and the low local fuel prices, as well as other operational savings. There is also anticipated to be a lower cost of borrowing for the 2020 debenture issue, which will have a lower amount of debt servicing costs across future budget years. The city finance team have enhanced the level of cash flow monitoring and analysis. Staff is also working closely with our area treasurers group and colleagues across the province through the Municipal Finance Officers Association and the Ontario Municipal Tax and Revenue Association to share ideas and strategies to respond to the financial and operational impacts of the pandemic. To conclude, staff are monitoring the financial impacts, managing mitigation options, and working on a multi-year plan to bring the city back to financial health using the multiple tools available, as we appreciate that will likely take longer than 1 year to achieve financial health. Thank
Let's go back to Shelley or Evan.
Back to Evan.
Okay, so I take that is the end of the update. And I'll look at the participants. I got a couple people who have put their hand up. So I got Councillor Littleton and then Councillor Sorrento. Okay, I got a whole bunch, so I'll just go through the list. Councillor Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to the senior leadership team for all you're doing during this time. I know it cannot possibly be easy, and so it's very much appreciated. I did want to ask about the community gardens. We touched a bit about the market opening, but I'm wondering if there's some information on the community gardens, if there's some way that we can get them open.
Through Mr. Mayor, that is something we have been working on. I don't see Phil Christie's face on my screen. Oh, Heather, there we go. I see.
I'm here. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll take a stab at that. Councillor, we haven't heard back from Public Health regarding community gardens, but certainly we are in constant contact with them. And so that's something that we will address again once we're on the line with them again.
Thank you. Thanks for that response. I'm wondering, if I can make a amendment to the motion, I don't know if it's time to do that now or later. I know the report's going to be received as information, but I'd like to make some directions.
Okay, so Counselor, why don't you make the motion on the floor, which is to receive the report, and then if you have
Sure.
something to add to it, you can add to it, and then this will be your motion.
Okay, sure. I just like just in light that I know the city of Kingston has been asking that the community gardens be declared as essential. I really do think that this is a opportunity to ensure that some members of our community don't grapple with food scarcity as much as they might. That I'm asking that the mayor request that the province update its direction to include community gardens as essential services, please.
Okay, so I'll look to Deputy Clerk. You captured that? Okay.
That's correct. I'll ask the council coordinator to bring that up on the screen.
Okay, we'll leave that there until we get through the rest of the speakers, just in case there's any other additions. Thank you, Councillor Littleton, for that.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Sorrento, you're up, and then Councillor Kushner, then Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to either CEO, Cabinet, or Director Pelletier. You mentioned that City Hall has received over 360 calls, I guess, citizens first. My question is, are our bylaw enforcement officers or staff overwhelmed with the number of calls? And is there a little bit of we have to give them an extra couple of days to respond to these queries and complaints?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can start, and then I would defer to Director Kate should she want to add anything additional, because it's being managed there between there and Brian York's staff. So we are sharing, we have our officers out working, we have citizens first during the day. After hours, calls are taken in by the region and triaged through to us or the NRP where appropriate. To our understanding at the control group updates that we have been able to cope with that level, but we certainly have had our officers doing things that they would not, in excess of what they normally would be doing. Thus far, I believe we are coping, but if either Director York or Kate wanted to add something additional to that, they can feel free to.
Thank you. Through the mayor to the councillor, the bylaw enforcement staff have been able to entertain and acknowledge and address the complaints that are coming in right now and absorbing that into their current workflow. Because we've had to make some adjustments to our responses to other types of bylaw complaints in connection with protocols from public health. So for example, our bylaw staff are not entering occupied buildings right now. So through capacity from that direction, they have now been able to take on the extra complaints that are coming in with respect to enforcing the provincial orders. We have been monitoring the calls that are coming in Monday through Friday, as well as monitoring the calls that are coming in over the weekend to municipal works. And we have found that the number of complaints are fairly consistent. There's no peaks and valleys. We have put in place secondary teams should the numbers of complaints warrant that, but we haven't had to take that leap quite yet.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. My next question, Mr. Mayor, through you, perhaps to one of the directors, either Director Smith or Director Martuccio. Our storage tanks, or to the chief as well, our gas storage tanks that we use to fill up our fleets, are those filled to capacity? And because of the cheaper gas prices, do we have any other tanks or reserves that we can fill? And I'm going to go out on a limb on this one, Mr. Mayor. Is there any way that we can kind of lock into some futures contracts at a cheaper gas? So through you to any one of the directors, please. Thank you.
Looks like Daryl had his hand up.
Evan, unmute me. Hello?
We can hear you.
Oh, thank you. I was still getting flashed that I was still muted. Sorry about that. So the gas tanks get filled on a regular basis. So it's not something that, we go weeks and weeks and weeks without filling the gas tanks. We use sufficient fuel in our operations that they're filled on a regular basis. So it's not like we're holding off and getting a better price. We are also in a contract with respect to the fuel supply. I don't know off the top of my head when that contract ends, but I can bring that offline and get back to the counselor on that. That will limit our ability to do anything with respect to the fuel at this point. Obviously, we'll have to meet our contractual obligations.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. One final question. I read something about cemeteries in the update from the senior management team. I did take a couple of calls, Mr. Mayor. I know that there were some people that were very concerned that they did want to go see their loved ones at Victoria Lawn. So my understanding, and for the benefit of the public, is that we are able to go to the cemetery as long as we are respecting the provincial guidelines, not having more than 5 people. And so I take it would be okay for 1 or 2 people to go to the sites and clean them up and plant flowers. Would that be accurate, Mr. Mayor, through you to any one of our senior team?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. We have blocked the cemetery access because we were getting large crowds that were using the cemetery as a picnic area. So we have blocked the access. There is still parking at the administration building. There is still parking along the roadway, and people can still access the cemetery as long as they follow the provincial guidelines.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sorrento. Councillor Garcia, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, perhaps to the CAO. First of all, like the other councilors, I would like to thank the staff for the incredible job that they're doing, keeping the city going at this stage and providing essential services. And I wanted to also compliment them on the FAQ that they have put together. I think it's very comprehensive, and it's something that we can refer questions to, which is helpful. I have a couple of specific questions, and one of them is following up on what I mentioned on your report, and that is, I think for the benefit of the public, we should probably issue some kind of a media release regarding grass cutting. It was just this past week that Councilor Williamson and I got a request from a local landscaper who said was concerned that he wasn't able to cut grass, and he felt it was essential to do so because of ticks and weeds, like we have said about our own parks. And at the time, the direction had not changed. As you said, it just changed yesterday. So I think it's important that the public and the landscapers know what the directive is and has changed to.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, thank you for that, Councillor Garcia. We certainly will be doing that in the upcoming days. The area, our communication staff have been working together with those communication staff at the region and throughout the region, such that we're hoping to have a consistent campaign across the region, which lets citizens know why we're out there cutting, as well as landscapers to know that it's okay for the landscapers to be out for doing those certain activities. It was felt very strongly that we should have a consistent message across the region, as are certainly the smaller companies. All of the companies work in various other municipalities. We want to make sure that across the region the message was the same, and that it wasn't that when you cross the border from, for instance, St. Catharines to Thorold, you would be treated differently. We wanted them to be treated the same across the region. So that is my understanding, that that campaign will be set to go in the next few days, if not this week already, early next.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. To you, Mr. Mayor, I assume to the CAO that one landscaper that got in touch with me, I could get in touch with them and let them know that it's okay for them to cut grass.
Certainly, I think the mayor phrased it quite well in his report as to what the criteria are, and that's public knowledge for certain. Yes.
Thank you. The second point, Mr. Mayor, to probably Director of Parks, in the report is mentioned specifically that we should not be, that parks are closed, but that you can walk, but that we should specifically not enter areas that are for sports, for example, and it mentions volleyball courts. I think that can be confusing because certainly the beach volleyball court at Lakeside Park, what you have are just the net posts there. There's quite a distance between them. So I don't see that there would be any problem in people, ones or twos, walking through that area because there isn't a game going on and it's not a game area. Would that be correct, Director?
So go to.
Mr. Mayor, I can just take this one in general. Again, the same sort of logic would apply. So if we had a number of people on the volleyball court playing volleyball, that's not permissible. If someone walks across that beach area, that would have been the volleyball court, that's going to be fine.
Okay, thank you. My last question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the clerk or the deputy clerk. I had an email this week, which I forwarded to the city clerk regarding marriage licenses, and she replied to me, but I just wanted to raise the issue. This lady said her daughter was planning on getting married in June, and it's been planned for a long time, and she wanted to see if she'd be able to get a license. And the reply was, of course, that they're looking into it. But I just wanted to ask the clerk if there is a possibility that we could grant those licenses, pardon me, online. I remember reading that, pardon me, I have allergies, that the state of New York was considering doing that, granting them online. And it seems to me it's something that could perhaps be done. And we're coming to the season when everybody's planning weddings, and I'm hoping that we can do something to help these people.
Bonnie, I saw you with your head shaking. You want to unmute Bonnie, Evan? There you go.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. At this point in time, as I stated in my email to you and to your the citizen that contacted you, the province still doesn't look at these as essential service. But I did write after I spoke to you or wrote to you. I have an email into the province asking them if there's any way in relaxing this, or if there is another practice that they could speak to me about. At this point in time, we've done an extensive review of many municipalities around us beyond the Niagara region that still are not doing them. And the basic reason is it's something that has to be done in person. So identification has to pass hands to issue licenses. That's one. You know, and if there's divorces involved or things like that, there's papers that have to be touched, there's signatures that have to be done, witnessing, etc. And that's basically the same process. So there'd be witnesses involved in civil ceremonies as well. So I've asked about online and whether they have any idea or inclination whether they'd be moving that way. But to date, Councillor, I have no response.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Garcia, is that it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Townsend, and then Councillor Kushner, and then Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I guess if this would go to the Director of Parks and Rec. I've just had a few people reach out with concerns with some trails or walkways in the city not having sufficient signs up. I'm wondering if maybe the Director could provide some details in that.
Okay, Daryl.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We have tried to sign, but if there are some specific trails that still require signage that may have been missed, then I can have my staff follow up on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Townsend. Councillor Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was also clarification of public spaces. Burgoyne Woods, for example, my understanding is that that's accessible to the public with the same restrictions. But my understanding is also that the police have warned people not to enter the park, and perhaps that can be clarified. Thank you.
Okay, so that'll be taken to direction to Daryl about Burgoyne Woods.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll follow up.
Okay. Any other counselors? So I'm looking at the list and there's no more counselors with questions. Unless
Councillor
someone,
Kushner has his hand raised.
oh, he has another one.
No, that's the same one.
Oh,
thank you.
sorry, okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, folks. So Councillor Littleton, you have the motion with the amendment. If Evan can put it on the screen.
Councillor Harris, sorry, it might have been Councillor Harris that had his hand up, not Councillor Kushner. I had the wrong one.
No, but I was looking and it looks like he pulled his hand down. So his hand back up.
No,
Yeah, I think
yeah,
I accidentally put his down instead of Councillor Kushner's.
Oh, okay, sorry. Councillor Harris, you're up.
that's okay. I don't feel bad. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, so I guess my questions through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO. We talk about landscaping and how that can continue on. I'm just wondering about the capital projects with regarding the city, because I understand the region, Welland and Niagara Falls are doing road work and things like that. And one of the messages the CAO mentioned was we kind of want to be uniform across the region. So how are we addressing it? Like, are we allowing road work or reconstruction, or what's happening, and how come we're different than Welland, the region, and Niagara Falls?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll start off and then Director Martuccio can sort of carry on, because we have, as it indicates there in the report, we are looking on a project by project basis as to looking at the intent of the orders and the individual projects as to whether they'll proceed or not. And I would say that in our conversations that we've had at the CAO table a number of times a week, that is very similar. In the early days, the region certainly had sort of the directive to continue going, but as time progresses, more of the municipalities are taking, when the official orders from the province came to be more specific, had been taking a closer look at their projects. So if Anthony had more to add to that based on the criteria that they're looking at, then that perhaps will be helpful.
Anthony?
Yeah. Hello.
There you go.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just like Shelley indicated, we are looking at projects on a project by project basis, and we are only proceeding with projects that are deemed essential or critical at this point. The way that we look at determining that is to see whether it's critical in the short term for now, until we have a better understanding from the province with regards to the orders. So anything that would result in water quality issues, safety to the public, environmental issues, those projects are proceeding. Anything where we're doing strictly asset renewal type projects, those projects are on hold for the time being. Some of our concerns with asset renewal projects is it actually results in disruption of services to homeowners, which is a concern, especially if, for example, if we're doing a water main replacement, then homeowners won't be able to wash their hands or do sanitation to make sure that they're staying safe and healthy at this point in time. So that's the approach that we've taken to date. However, we are in constant communication with other public works officials, and we are constantly reviewing the criteria.
And if I might add also to that is that one of the other concerns is if it's a project that's not done by our own forces, if the project is done by another contractor, an outside private firm, if the greater provincial orders have indicated that that firm is one that shouldn't be operating in this scenario, then the choice is made for us through that. So there is also that aspect to our decision making.
Councillor Harris?
I guess, okay, so that's great and everything, but is there any implications to the cost? Like if we put off some of these jobs, or perhaps could they escalate and cost the taxpayer a little bit more money?
I'll go to Anthony or Shelley.
I guess I can start, Mr. Mayor. In some instances, it would be dependent on if it's a tender that's already in progress, and some of those we've seen to have them proceed if we can. If there's something that hasn't been tendered yet, that's a determination of how the markets will be afterwards. You know, each project would be individually different, so they're looking at each project individually.
Councillor Harris.
The question needs clarity. Who's the best person to contact?
For
or like paving, anything like that.
I'll look to the CAO. I would imagine if there's questions related to paving, who would be taking that? Director Martuccio? Yeah?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so Councillor, you can connect with Director Martuccio. Anything further from Councillor Harris? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Council. And again, we'll go back to Councillor Littleton. And Evan, Council Coordinator, is going to bring up on the split screen. Working feverishly. We're all looking at the screen, waiting for the split screen to happen. See if it comes. There it comes. All right. Okay, Councillor Littleton, are you on the mic?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure that the language is. So with that, that'll be direction for my office to communicate the council's request.
Through the mayor, we may want to change the wording a little bit. The community gardens are not considered, they're not defined as essential services under the provincial orders. They're defined related to outdoor amenities. So I suggest maybe we just make it a little more general.
Such as what?
Something along the lines of the council requested the province remove restrictions placed on community gardens related to COVID-19.
Okay, that sounds appropriate.
Is there any concerns?
Councillor Littleton, are you fine with as it's being typed?
Yeah, as long as the intent is just to lift any kind of barriers to having people be able to use the community gardens. So that's fine.
Right. Okay. Okay. Seeing no, and I'll go to the deputy clerk. Here's not seeing anyone with their hands up because we're all just looking at the motion right now. So if no one has their hands up, I just want to say thank you to the CAO for putting together this report with your team. Very thorough, and I would expect that the next update we'll be seeing some numbers, some more hard numbers. You're starting to see some numbers come out of other jurisdictions, so I think that'll give us a comparative that we can look at where we are and how we're doing. But this is very detailed analysis, so I just want to say thanks to you and the team for all the work that you're doing there. Call the question.
Hold on a second, I gotta vote.
So we have Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yeah.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
That's not me.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
And Mayor Sensing.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, thank you for that. When it comes to the staff had mentioned that fireworks are now for the period of time prohibited. So there will be some kind of announcement made on that so that the public can expect not to see the fireworks being for sale at the corners of busy intersections and places like that for the remainder of the situation that we're in. And I want to compliment the fire chief for making sure that something like this is considered because of the negative impact it could have on the fire services in the community if a whole bunch of people were deciding to have fireworks off in each of their backyards on any given street. It could create a lot of concerns. So just this is going to be an important one as we head into the May long weekend in the next month or so. I just wanted to give everyone a heads up on that. The next one is 3.2, and 3.2 is the Neil Peart Commemorative Task Force. And prior to the meeting, Councillor Williamson put his name forward to be appointed to the task force. He did so saying that he would be willing to sing one of the Rush songs at the naming of things like the pavilion. So I'm going to hold him to that. And Councillor Garcia, I believe you have a motion. Evan? Councillor Garcia?
I don't see the motion, but I would also like to say that I would like to submit my name forward for consideration to be on that task force.
Currently, it's Councillor Williamson, so I think it would be good if we just had one from Port Dalhousie at this point in time. I think both of you, having two representatives from Port Dalhousie, I think Councillor Williamson, who's been leading the charge on this in terms of putting the task force together, I think if we can allow him to carry the torch on this one, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Well, my concern is, Mr. Mayor, that anything we do regarding public art, for example, or heritage, I'm the chair of the Cultural Sustainability Pillar and attend all the meetings of the Heritage Committees and the Public Art Advisory Committee to be intimately involved. I agree that Councillor Williamson should be involved, but I think we should both be there.
Well, again, we're trying to keep the task force to a limited number, and I think you'll be able to get the information as it comes up to the Public Works or the Public Arts Committee. Again, it's always expanding these task force to put more councillors on. It's myself and Councillor Williamson at this point in time. I'd like to keep it at that number.
Well, I don't agree, but can I make an amendment that that I be added?
Or we could have a vote. We could have Councillor Williamson and you stand for an election on the task force, and whoever gets the majority of votes will be the member of council that sits on the task force.
Well, again, I think the preferred alternative is for us both to be on, but I'd like to hear from Councillor Williamson what he thinks.
I would be thrilled to have both of us on the committee. Yeah, I'm prepared to serve, and Councillor Garcia and I cooperate, and you know, there may be a meeting that I can't attend or he can't attend, and we could cover for each other. So I'd like to have him on the committee as well, of course.
Okay, sure. All right, so just add people on, that's fine. So Councillor Kushner?
I would make a motion to the effect that they both be on the committee. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Townsend, you had your hand up? Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. No other questions? Call the question.
I do see the city clerk is a question or a statement.
I can't see anything. Okay, what's the statement?
Mr. Mayor, just to make sure that if we've added a second body, I'm not sure what the actual terms of reference state, but we should put in the motion that we amend the terms of reference accordingly, because I think we might have the wrong number.
Okay. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Councillor Garcia, when did you decide you wanted to be on the committee?
I I decided when I first saw the motion on the agenda, which just had a blank there, it didn't say that anybody had been appointed. And I may add that, you know, we like to be involved in items to do with Port Lucie. And for example, neither Councilor Williamson nor I played an active role in the whole process for naming the pavilion. So I think it's important that we get involved with this one.
Yeah. Okay. So next time, just put your name forward in advance instead of waiting for the meeting. Okay. So, so we should, what do we want to do here to the deputy clerk?
So I do see that Councillor Sorrento also has their hands up, but Councillor Kushner has put forward a motion to appoint both Councillor Garcia and Councillor Williamson. And we would also add the clause that the terms of reference be amended.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Kushner, are you finished?
That's what I was going to suggest, that the appropriate amendments take place too.
Councillor Sorrento?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can we split that up, the adding Councillor Garcia to the task force?
Yeah, you can split the motion.
Split it, please. And am I able to speak to it?
You can speak to it.
You know, I know, Councillor, I don't sit on every committee that Councillor Townsend's on. Councillor Townsend doesn't sit on every committee that I'm on, Mr. Mayor. We work together very, very well, as do Councillor Williamson and Councillor Garcia. I'll tell you, this has been happening a few times now, where all of a sudden an amendment right out of the blue comes right up. And I think the last time it had something to do with planning or something, it was one of those things where we don't get any notice. All right, now we're changing the terms of reference. Hey, you know what? Why not open it up to the rest of council? I'm sure there are a lot of other councillors that would love to be on that committee. So, you know, I do take a little bit of umbrage to it. And I think that not only you and staff, but I think we as councillors should get at least some kind of a notification. So, you know, and this has been happening a few times now. So that's my 2 cents. And quite honestly, Mr. Mayor, I think it's disrespectful to you, okay, because you've already laid this out to you know, to put the name forward. I don't want to interfere with that democratic process, but at least give everybody a heads up and give everybody an opportunity. It's starting to get under my skin, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. That's all I've got. We can split it. I appreciate it.
Okay, I'll look to the clerk, the deputy clerk, in terms of splitting the motion. So it would simply be approval.
We would first vote on, so I would suggest we first vote on appointing Councillor Garcia to the task force, and then the second motion would be to appoint Councillor Williamson and amend the terms of reference to reflect the additional councillor.
Okay. Councillor, I don't want to get into any debates here, so Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, I think I should react to what Councillor Sorrento said. I take exception to that. I had no notification that said that we should submit our name in advance. All I saw was an agenda item with a blank in it. And I assumed that that meant that we were supposed to fill it out at the meeting, as we always have.
Okay, Councillor Williamson.
Sorry, did you not hear me?
No,
I
you're
have.
no.
Yes, thank you. I see no harm in having us both on the committee. Thank you.
Councillor Littleton.
I just had a question. The deputy clerk mentioned that we'd be voting on the second part first, but not to appoint Councillor Williamson first. I'm confused as to why we wouldn't do that first.
The order of the motions is related to the amendment first, and then going backwards to the main motion. So the item we had at first was the staff recommendation, followed by appointing Councillor Williamson, And then the next item was to appoint Councillor Garcia. So if the request is to split the vote, I would recommend that you work in reverse.
Councilor Littleton, is that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I guess I think I'm not going to say anything further. That's fine.
Appreciate that. Councilor Williamson?
This was Councillor Kushner's motion. Wouldn't Councillor Sorrento's be an amendment, and Councillor Kushner could decide whether it was friendly or not?
No, he's just asking to split the motion, which is, it's non-debatable.
Well, it changes the whole tenor of Councillor Kushner's motion.
No, I'll look to the deputy clerk. It's splitting the motion. So the first one, I think I'll allow her to rule on it.
Yeah, if a councillor has requested to split a motion, it's similar to if a councillor puts forward a motion and then another councillor requests an amendment. If it's unfriendly, we vote on the amendment first and then vote on the original motion. So if a councillor has requested to split it, we vote on that first, and then whatever is remaining, it gets voted on.
Okay, is that clear? Okay, call the question on the second part of the motion, which is to add Councillor Garcia.
Okay, Councillor, oh, we're just gonna wait for everyone to get unmuted. Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Littleton?
No.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Porter?
Yes.
Councillor Cisco?
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento?
No.
Councillor Townsend?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Mayor Senzik?
No.
And that's carried.
Okay, so the next one.
So this is to appoint Councillor Williamson and amend the terms of reference for the additional council representative. Councillor Phillips, or sorry, Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Littleton?
Yes. Yes.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Porter?
Yes.
Councillor Cisco?
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento?
Yes.
Councillor Townsend?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Mayor Senzik?
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, I'd like to thank Councillor Williamson for bringing this forward. Well, for the idea to come forward with this, and I'll be working with the clerk's office to send out the information for those willing to put their seats, to put their names forward, and I'll be working with the clerk's office to come up with that list. Okay, 2.2, planning and building services. This is Councillor Kushner. You pulled this from consent. I'm going to ask first Judy Peahawk, Manager of Planning Services, to provide an overview of the report and staff recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon to all. I firstly want to provide a bit of a background with respect to the urgency of making a decision on this report at this point in time. So the situation is such that all applications for severances that go to the Committee of Adjustment must first go to the Design Review Panel. The circumstances of our COVID-19 situation makes it difficult, if not, I don't believe any committees of council are meeting under the current circumstance. So we've got a bit of a catch-22 where applications to the Committee of Adjustment can't get to DRP, and then they can't get to the Committee of Adjustment. So we have a bit of a holding pattern there that's starting to build up in terms of the number of applications in the queue. So that's the sense of urgency that we're seeking from council in terms of making a decision on this today. So secondly, I'm just going to briefly highlight a couple of things in the report that I think are really important. As some of you will recall, the design review panel was originally established in 2017 at the direction of council and as a pilot project. Its mandate at the time was to provide an additional review lens on severance applications, and the mandate of the DRP was limited in scope in terms of providing urban design comments only. So the DRP has now been in effect for approximately 2.5 years. The regulatory environment now is substantially different than the regulatory environment that existed when DRP was established. So I just want to go through and highlight what those changes were, basically a before and after scenario. So the key changes are this. Number one, there was a number of zoning amendments made to the zoning bylaw that now prohibit many of the lots that were previously created that were the most offensive in terms of infill projects. So the approval of those amendments and them taking full force and effect has basically remedied a lot of the circumstances that prevented those earlier projects going forward. And the report outlines those amendments in detail, what they did and how they've assisted in the infill development scenario. The second change is the routine use of development agreements, which are registered on title and essentially bind the owner and the applicant to build what they say they're going to build. So the Committee of Adjustment essentially creates the lot, but what we were finding prior to development agreements being a routine application was that what they presented at the Committee of Adjustment was not necessarily what they built and what they included as their building permit. So the development agreement is the binding tool that ties those two together. The third thing is the introduction of a pre-consultation process for the severance application process. It's a relatively new step for severance applications. We do it routinely with others. And what that does is capture what would otherwise be development review panel comments within the pre-consultation process. And of course, we have our own urban designer on staff that is capable of providing comments that are very similar to those provided by DRP. So in staff's opinion, it is not efficient and it's not effective to continue the DRP in light of the fact that we've introduced this pre-consultation process. Finally, the benefit of having the DRP in place, we've learned a lot in that process. We've learned a lot in terms of what to look for on a severance application. And certainly it's been a learning experience that we can take advantage of going forward. And I feel that we have the staff complement and qualifications and skill sets that can equally provide those comments at a staff level and thereby making the continuation of DRP somewhat redundant in terms of process. So those are the 4 points that have changed from circumstances that prevailed when the DRP was first established and what's in effect today. So it's for those reasons that we're recommending that the DRP discontinued and that it be reconstituted in a different scope and format as outlined in the report. And that the true urgency here is clearing the path for Committee of Adjustment severance applications to continue to be processed. I think it's important to support the business community as much as we can and remain open for business as much as we can during these times. And we're putting that in front of council for consideration.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Judy. And that was a great summation of the staff's position on the report that's in front of us. Councillor Kushner, you've pulled this from consent.
And in the amendment, and my understanding is that the clerk's office does have it. Perhaps we could put it on the screen.
Well, when did you send the amendment, Councillor?
Well, I sent it, I've been communicating with the Judy P. Hack, and I sent it today.
So we have a, okay. So let's wait for Evan to bring it up. And Evan, is this Councillor Kushner's amendment?
So this screen here is the amendment from Councillor Kushner. The screen that was up initially was the staff recommendation.
Well, that's a big change, a lot of changes. Okay. So for council, this amendment was just submitted and now you're being asked, it looks like, I'll go to Director Kitte for a review of this before we have a discussion of council, because there is a lot of language in here that's clearly been changed.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council, planning staff continue to support the recommendation that's contained in the staff report that was spoken to earlier. The amendments from the councillor that are before you now, especially the final paragraph, is somewhat a redundancy of process. So what you've heard from the manager of planning is that the DRP process, as it is today, was a pilot project brought in with a very narrow scope to only deal with consents. We have now replaced that with a pre-consultation process for the period leading up to an application, new zoning standards to deal with the application, and a development agreement registered on title to deal with the implementation. So the final paragraph here is saying that we need to maintain that original scope, and I disagree. I think that's entirely redundant to the process that the manager of planning has just outlined for you. That being said, we have also undertaken the review of the DRP process, and we are suggesting that in its current form, that it be discontinued. But we are seeking council's permission to go forward and do an expanded DRP, one that will look at more strategic initiatives, citywide design policies, as well as more strategic developments of properties such as the GM site or the general hospital site, to look at policies, among other things. So we see a role for the DRP, but we see an expanded role for the design review panel. And this would much better utilize the skill set of the DRP, which is currently made up with one at-large member and then several design professionals, including architects and landscape architects, urban designers, and such. And we have consulted with the development community. We have consulted with members of the DRP as well as staff and others in preparing this report and bringing it for you today. And the DRP members have the expertise to look at those larger picture strategic initiatives. I would suggest that it's not a great use of their skill set to be so narrowly scoped. So the original recommendation that's in front of council would be my preference that be considered tonight. But if the one before you is how council wishes to proceed, I do want to highlight that the last paragraph is highly problematic in that it creates a process redundancy.
Okay, that's a very good summation. And so you've heard from staff who have clearly articulated their position. Councillor Kushner, would you still like to proceed with the amendment?
Yes, I would. Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
Yeah, and I did consult with the design review panel, and they are very much in favor of this. And in fact, they talked about the design review panel in Niagara-on-the-Lake, Hamilton, and Toronto. And in those communities, they have something very similar. And in fact, they have expanded criteria. And the criteria that they have is with respect to sustainability and impact on the environment. And I would imagine that our staff, when they do the review, they would consider what the other communities have. And the reason I brought this forward, the first paragraph is consistent with what Judy Pehack indicated, that the motion does clear the path for the applications that could come to us in the next couple of months during the corona pandemic. So there's no problem there. It will not hold up any developments during that time period. And the purpose of the amendments are to ensure that the good work done by the design review panel continues. And prior to having a panel, we had some development that was extremely detrimental to our neighborhoods, even though the policy at that time was that the developments be compatible with the neighborhood. And not surprisingly, some of this bad development, and these are single lots that I'm referring to, because the other development where the lots are larger have worked very well because it allowed for proper citizen participation. But not surprisingly, these severances began in South St. Catharines and then Meryton, and then to other areas of the city. And my understanding is that there are some planners or some developers that are very pleased that the committee would be suspended because they think that the process for them to build would be that much easier, which may very well be the case. But the amendment does give some direction to staff that they look at the same criteria. The elevations, for example, are very important. Designs that were considered by the design review panel. And I did consult with Judy Pehack on the amendment, and there's some disagreement, of course, but this is what I came up with. And I also consulted with the design review panel. They had never seen the report before it came to council. There's some consultation, but they did not see that. They did not see the end recommendation.
Okay, so through the I'm gonna, as chair, I'm gonna chair the meeting, and I'll talk about the last paragraph. You've heard very clearly from staff that's redundant. Are you willing to strike out the last paragraph?
Not really. If somebody wants to separate it, then fine.
Okay, well, that's unfortunate. I'll go to Councillor Sorrento.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I guess, to the directors. I did want to split it out before, but then after I acquired some additional information, I don't think that I can support this. So my question through you, some of the questions I have, Mr. Mayor, through you, either to the Director of Planning or the Manager of Planning, how would this affect the consent reports if this amendment were to be passed?
Through the mayor to the councillor, it depends on which form that it depends on which form the amendment were to pass. The current language says that council suspend the DRP for a temporary period. Given that, we can still continue with Committee of Adjustment applications for consent to sever, but that's what we would need at this point.
Okay. If the amendment were to pass, how would it affect the planning policy? How would it affect staff's ability to work efficiently and faster to deal with the incoming applications?
Sorry about that, councillor. Through the mayor to the councillor. We are going to be going ahead with the new proposed pre-consultation process for severances anyways. If we still have DRP, if the amendment were to pass, we are now actually adding another layer of process to the Committee of Adjustment process for severances. So it would be in addition to a pre-consultation process, which is not efficient. The proposal is that we wrap a comprehensive review into application proposals prior to application. So this way, an applicant is getting a much more comprehensive discussion around their applications before they spend the money on application fees. We would look at all things, including grading and compatibility and parking and zoning and all of those fun things. We were going to rope design, our proposals that we rope design into that conversation with the applicants. So now if we're having a pre-consultation process with applicants and we're going to be putting them through another process for DRP on top of that, the Committee of Adjustment is identified under the Planning Act as having very tight timeframes. And the purpose of doing that is that they're seen as having more accessible to the public applications that are quicker and faster. And I think that adding a DRP as a third layer is redundant, and I don't think it will help with efficiency, and I don't think it'll help with any language or any messaging that's going to the development community about process efficiency.
Through you to the director, and I've just switched screens to my agenda notes here. You mentioned something about an additional layer of being added to the process. So would it be a fair statement to say that this additional layer would cost additional time, additional cost? It would impact staff because it would extend the review for approximately another 4 weeks. And would this also not be essentially a duplication of what staff is already doing?
Through the mayor to the councillor, yes, this would be a duplication of process. It would add weeks to a severance application, and it would be an unnecessary drain on staff resourcing.
So in short, would it be a fair statement to say that should this amendment pass, it would probably be more of a hindrance than something that would enhance staff with their work in the department?
Through the mayor, planning staff strongly believe in urban design as an integral part of all development applications. And as such, we want to bring that in as part of a more comprehensive conversation with the applicants through a pre-consultation process. So having a DRP process on top of that would be redundant, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I will move to split the motion, in particular, to split the amendment and the last paragraph as well. But I would just like to say, with the greatest respect, here we have an amendment, with the greatest respect to Councillor Kushner, to the mover. You know, we've had little time. Now, Councillor Kushner, I believe, did send us an email. I can't remember if it was yesterday or the day before, but we didn't see the amendment. It would have been nice to be able to do just a little bit more research, because these are very, very important amendments, and you know, it affects the department and it affects them. And what I'm getting out of this, Mr. Mayor, is that it's not going to be a help. And staff did say that they do want to expand the role and incorporate the design review panel and their recommendations. But they've also stated, as Manager Piak just said, okay, when we instituted this particular panel, this advisory committee, okay, that was a different time. That was almost 2 years ago, I believe. We no longer need that. Staff is stating that very clearly in the report, Mr. Mayor. So I'll move to split it, and if it's appropriate procedurally. And those are my comments, and thank you very much.
Toronto, Councillor Porter, you're next.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
I have a lot of questions. I do believe that design review panels are important. I haven't had a lot of time to do some research, but Toronto has and for private projects that have a huge impact on the public realm, those on major streets and avenues or in the downtown core. So what I think, from what I understand from staff, is that they envision the DRP moving in that direction. So I think both Councillor Kushner agrees with that, and I think staff agree with kind of a new purpose or vision for the DRP. Is that, can I hear from both of you? Is that where you are in agreement?
Through the mayor to the councillor, yes, that's, I agree with that statement. We absolutely see a role for a DRP and their skills and expertise in implementing our strategic vision, as well as some more forward-thinking urban design initiatives in our public realm, as well as large sites, policy, and other areas. So yes, that would be much more in line with most GTA urban design panels that exist right now.
Councillor Kushner, is that your understanding when you say that you want a new scope? Or no, you're saying you want to retain some of the original scope, but you agree with an expansion of or a change in the role of the DRP to include kind of major projects and projects important to the public realm?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Absolutely, yes. If it has worked for small severances, I think it becomes much more important for the larger developments, and therefore I totally support what staff is saying. And I might add that in the past, the larger sites have not been that problematic, but it's the severance of undersized lots that have become problematic, and therefore continuation. And I'd like to stress that the design review panel agrees with the amendment.
Okay. Through the mayor to the director of planning, when has the new pre-consultation process started? Has it just started recently? I know we've added some new processes to kind of fix some of the problems that we had with infill in the past. Did that just start recently? And could the DRP change its role so that it just kind of monitors the new process and takes a look at the outcomes and kind of provides feedback? Could that be a role of the DRP instead of getting involved in this? Could it move to a role of monitoring the new processes and feedback?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I think in terms of monitoring where a design review panel's expertise could be better utilized is actually in developing those, helping assist in the development of urban design policies and visionary statements and guidelines. And that way we are in fact implementing their advice in that regard. Could I ask you again to repeat the first part of your question? My headphone came out a little bit.
It's when did we start the new pre-consultation?
So staff over the past quarter have been working internally with members of the Committee of Adjustment, Development Engineering, Zoning, and Development Planning staff at a process review, a business process management review of the entire Committee of Adjustment process. So this work has been ongoing. We had actually identified pre-consultation for the Committee of Adjustment as part of some development review last year. So the pre-consultations for Committee of Adjustment were expected to start Q2 of this year. They have not started just yet.
Okay. I think there's got to be a way forward for this that makes everyone happy. I think I have another question. Give me 1 second. What I want to say is that a lot of the complaints that I get, they're not necessarily from developers themselves, but they're from people with construction projects. And one of the areas we need to focus on is in the planning or in the building services department. There are some challenges there. And so I see adding another layer as maybe not the best customer service. And if we're waiting for people to submit some drawings and then it has to go to this committee after the fact, rather than spending the time up front, it's just going to make, just going to cause more frustration. So I think that the staff have worked to put processes in place to deal with the kind of bad infills that we saw in the last few years. And I would like to see that, see if that works. And I think there's a role for the design review panel to monitor that, but maybe not get in the way. I wonder if I'm comfortable with Councillor Kushner's amendment, except for the last part. So I would like to vote on that separately, because I think that I don't see the point in having a conversation now about retaining the original scope. I think we need to spend more time on that. I'm not prepared. I need to hear more arguments. I'm hearing two sides, that somebody saying the design review panel is fine with the staff report, somebody else saying they're fine with the amendment, and we haven't had time to consult with anybody on this. So I can't support the last part of the motion.
That split as Councillor Sorrento was asked as well. So I have Councillor Garcia next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted some clarification from staff through you on the pre-consultation. Number one question is, was that not always available to me or anybody trying to have an application before the Committee of Adjustment, that we could consult with staff and get their advice on what would be allowed and so on?
Through the mayor to the councillor, in terms of Committee of Adjustment applications, any opportunity for pre-consultation, it was not a formalized process and it wasn't mandatory. So if an applicant reached out to staff to pick their brain on a proposal they wanted to put forward, absolutely we would make ourselves available and have that conversation with applicants, but it wasn't mandatory. What we are proposing is a mandatory pre-consultation process for the Committee of Adjustment applications, which are similar to that of the applications for other development applications under the Planning Act. So this would be a much more comprehensive review of an application. So the DRP right now is like a pre-consultation that's only design focused. What we are proposing is a more holistic, comprehensive pre-consultation process, which would be not just design, but also look at development engineering and zoning, development planning, traffic, all types of lenses of impacts that we would look at in terms of these applications. So by going with the staff recommendation, we're not losing a design lens in reviewing these applications. We're actually gaining by going through a pre-consultation process. The way the amendment is worded is we would actually have to layer on a third, like a DRP process on top. And that I would much rather bring that into the pre-consultation process. So the applicants are coming in once, they're having that holistic discussion rather than coming in once for pre-con, then another time for DRP, then coming in to make a formal application. So again, the last paragraph of the amendment is creating a redundancy in process.
Thank you. And for you, Mr. Mayor, a second question to the director. The municipalities that have a design review panel and are presumably happy with it, like, for example, Niagara-on-the-Lake was used. Do they have a similar situation where they have a duplication of process, in your opinion, or is it because they don't have the pre-consultation process?
Through the mayor to the councillor, my experience with design review panels has been much more GTA based, and their mandates have always been a wider, more broad scope where they've looked at urban design policy, guidelines, creating educational opportunities, and focusing on large development sites and large developments. I've never come across any design review panels that are so scoped in nature that they only look at consent applications such as this one. That's not to say that there aren't municipalities that use this option, but we are an intensifying city. We are the largest city in Niagara, and we should be thinking in terms of a broader scope for our urban design expertise, both through our panel and in staff. So we have looked at other municipalities. That's been done at the staff level, but I don't have this specific information in front of me.
Okay, thank you. And for you, one final question. Obviously, expanding the mandate to look at larger projects makes a lot of sense. So my question to the director would be, how soon would that expanded role recommendation come back? I'm thinking specifically the GM lands are mentioned, but we are expecting a large proposal for Port Dalhousie and the old tower site soon, and it would be great to have input from somebody like a design review panel.
So through the mayor to the councillor, I believe the staff report recommended coming back to council with the revised terms of reference towards Q4 of this year. With regards to the two specific properties that you just discussed, the DRP, if we are able to bring back a terms of reference in a new DRP format by Q4 of this year, operational for Q1 of next year, it would absolutely be in operation for anything to be constructed on the GM land site. As for the Port Dalhousie project that you mentioned, that site is currently under LPAT litigation, and there would be limited opportunity for the DRP to be involved at that time. That being said, the project applicants for that property have brought on urban design expertise, and there are substantial urban design discussions taking place from the city side as well, so that is top of mind.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, I understand what Councillor Kushner is requesting with that last paragraph, because I think those infill residential lots were a real problem, and the DRP has helped with that. So I will certainly support the intent of that.
Okay, Councillor Williamson.
Am I on?
Yeah.
Hello, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the planner. Through either scenario, is there going to be a gap in not having some kind of a design review of developments coming?
Director Kitte.
Sorry, through the mayor to the councillor, I don't think I fully appreciate the question. So right now the DRP is only occurring for the review of severance applications. So what we're saying is we would replace that with a pre-consultation process. When it comes to other development applications that we have pre-consultations for, such as official plan amendments, zoning, site plans, subdivisions, and such, we do have urban design discussions at those pre-consultation processes. So in all instances, going forward with pre-consultations, we will be having urban design conversations with the applicants prior to formal applications being made.
Thank you. My impression is that this is fairly time sensitive. Is it possible to, we've got Councillor Kushner seems like he's gotten sort of consulted with the design review panel and people just recently. So is there a chance to refer this back and try and get the two you together with design review people and try and work something out that's mutually useful?
So through the mayor to the councillor, unfortunately, we need a decision on this today. Council passed today a revised procedural bylaw to allow us to continue with the committee of adjustment process. If we do not make a decision on suspending or discontinuing the DRP today, we will not be able to move forward with processing committee of adjustment applications, and that is problematic. We do have quite the backlog. We haven't had any meetings since early February, and our workload is the applications coming in are building up, and it is going to create quite the bottleneck for us. So we do need a decision on this today. If not, we will be delaying the committee of adjustment role quite a bit further into the future.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can you all we're seeing is just the motion. We can't see anything else. Can you at least, are you able to lower it so that we can see some councillors? Because the difficulty is that we don't know if we're mic'd or unmic'd. Are you able to do that or no?
The only thing that I can do, Mr. Mayor, is stop the screen share, and then that would bring up gallery view for everyone.
Okay,
But
okay, forget
I
it.
can only do full screen or nothing else.
Okay, so what I'm going to ask, Evan, is that only the person who's speaking has their mic unmuted. So there's been times when you've unmuted my mic and someone else is speaking. I don't need to have that, because then there's a interference with what people are saying. Okay, thank you. Next I have Councillor Townsend.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I guess my concern is I would have liked to have had a little bit more time to look into this and do some more research on the DRP. But from what I'm understanding from staff, the original scope does need to change. My question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Planning: how many other municipalities do have this, a pre-consultation and then a DRP? Is that common practice?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I am not aware of any municipalities that have a pre-consultation and a DRP for Committee of Adjustment applications.
Okay, and one more question. I just want to understand the pre-consultation, just to understand completely, does replace and answer some of the DRP, take over the responsibilities from DRP, correct?
The mayor to the councillor, that's correct. The pre-consultation process would incorporate what the DRP's objectives are.
Okay, thank you.
Harris, you got your hand up?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. I guess my question is, it seems to me that staff have put forward this report, and it kind of makes sense. The idea is to move forward, process these applications. We're looking at expanding the role of the DRP in the future. So they're actually going to have more responsibilities and be more involved with the city as a whole and be involved in all kinds of aspects of development, I guess. So I'm just wondering why we're struggling with this. Would it not just make sense to move forward with the staff recommendation, and then staff will come back with terms of reference, and then we can move forward with this expanded role? I feel like I'm missing something here. I don't know who can answer that though.
Missing too much. I think you're pretty accurate.
So would it not just make sense? Can we just pass the original motion? Like maybe Councillor Kushner, we could just do the original motion with a timeline, maybe speed up the timeline for the terms of reference? Because I guess what I'm confused about is that on one hand, we're saying that this committee is against the staff recommendation. And then on the other hand, we're hearing that they're for it. Like, I need some clarification, but to me, in the situation we're in, we should probably move forward with the staff recommendation and just wait for this terms of reference to come back, because we're kind of in a crisis mode. If we have all this backlog of things from February, we kind of want to speed it up and get it going. So I don't know if that's a question or if that's a hint that maybe we move forward or we do something.
Councillor Kushner, after all of the discussion that you heard, are you still intent on the amendment?
Yes. What I would suggest is that the last part, which people are having difficulty with, and which I agree should not be holding up developments. But my question regarding that is, why can we not have pre-consultation with the staff and the design review panel? And therefore that wouldn't add any time. And so to expedite the process, I agree with staff that the first part is important because we don't want a backlog, and that there be an expanded role. So perhaps what would be appropriate is to defer the contentious part, which is the last part, and have input from the DRP, and then approve the first part, which is the intent of staff.
Okay, so you've already spoke to it, so you can't make a deferral. What we'll do is when we split the motions up, we'll take that under consideration, whether or not just to defeat the last one or just to move it forward. So, Councillor Harris, does that answer your question?
Yes. Maybe Cisco will defer it right now.
I got Counselor Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, really, a lot of my comments were along the lines of Councillor Harris's. But I did have just a quick question about, it is really bothering me that the staff report has, and staff are the experts at City Hall. They work with people in planning all the time. They have the degrees that tell us they are the experts, and they wrote a report saying that they spoke to the design review panel, and now we're hearing that the design review panel is saying something different. So I just wanted to ask staff, you spoke to the panel and they seem to be in favor of what you're doing. So can you just confirm, was that the case?
Through the mayor to the councillor, last year I sat down with the entire design review panel and I had just a very broad conversation with them. At that time, they had all indicated to me that they felt that their skills and expertise were being undervalued by having such a small scope. I will defer to the manager of planning to discuss the more recent conversations that happened with the design review panel around the proposal that's before council today.
So just to clarify, there was a number of discussions with, is everybody able to hear me?
Okay, Judy's still muted. Evan, can you unmute her?
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Further to Tammy's discussions with the design review panel, I think I had further discussions with them probably on a couple of occasions regarding their role, how they viewed the benefit they were providing to the process. And I took away the general consensus is a lot of them are frustrated because they don't feel that their skills are utilized and that they could have a much more impactful role in larger development applications and a broader scope, more of a public realm scenario. Admittedly, we did not circulate this report to the members of the TRP up until just earlier today, I believe. So they were not aware of the recommendation. I think unless there was a miscommunication or a misunderstanding of what was intended in those discussions, I took away the greater concern was having a role in larger applications. So I think from that perspective, I can't speak to what Joe's discussions were today with the DRP because I obviously wasn't part of those discussions. But notwithstanding, the point that I think is important, if you look at the skill set on the DRP, we have one planner, we have one urban design planner from another municipality, we have a retired architect, we have a planning technician, and we have one member at large. So all of those people who have the planning technical expertise, we have the exact expertise on staff. So the only thing we're missing in the DRP role is the input from the general public. So we have a member at large who contributes to that role. I think it's important to know that when an application goes to the Committee of Adjustment, it's a public process. The public still has the opportunity to ask questions, to raise concerns, to ask for modifications, to recommend denial of an application, and that all falls in the purview of the Committee of Adjustment. So to make the case that DRP, and I don't want to undermine their role, they've been great to deal with, and we, as I said earlier, learned a lot from them, but I'm very confident in the fact that we have the technical expertise that is currently on the committee, and save and except for the member at large, and that particular element can be captured in the public process of the Committee of Adjustment. So I think if you look at it from that perspective, The DRP and RMIT is a redundant process, and it will add time and money to the overall process if we keep it. And that's not only for the applicant, but it's also for staff.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so instead of this continuing then, staff, you are recommending that we use these skill sets, for example, a planner, an urban designer, one retired architect, another planning technician, and the member at large. We use these skill sets to do more consulting than just severance applications, because that's all that they look at right now. Am I correct?
That's correct.
So we're going to look at giving them more input, more ability to discuss a far greater range of applications than just severance. And that's what we're dealing with right now.
No, what we're recommending is the DRP in its current form, which is strictly related to urban design matters on severance applications. We're recommending discontinuing that role and expanding the role into these larger projects. And what goes with that is a redefinition of the terms of reference for the design review panel. And we'll probably trigger a reset on the skill set that we're looking for that design review panel. So that the skill set under the current design review panel was probably fairly limited given the scope of the panel, but on a redefined broader scope terms of reference for a new DRP, we may look at redefining that skill set as well.
Sure, but just so that I have it crystal clear, because I like to be concise and brevity is beautiful. We are going to look at expanding the panel's ability to comment on design and planning applications. And that would be basically allowing them to do more with their skills.
No, I don't think that's exactly right. No, the skill set that we defined for the members on the current DRP was based on the scope of the DRP as it was established in 2017. If we are looking for a different scope on a new DRP, we will likely look for different skill sets than what we have now.
Use those skill sets in a larger capacity than the former skill sets that were acknowledged in only severance applications.
Sorry, Councillor Littleton, I only got the last half of that.
I hate online meetings. I guess my frustration is that I feel like staff has brought this report. I'm just going to say, staff's brought a report saying, listen, we had this old system that we were using. We think that the peoples who are experts and wonderful people, and they have lots of ideas, can hardly give those ideas because they only can give them on severance applications. So council, we want to disband this. We want to create a better program. We want to have, whether it's different or continuing skill sets, it doesn't matter, but we want to look at a way of using those that are in our community more in a better way. And we're bogged down here in discussing this, and I can't get my head around why. So I'm in full support of the staff recommendation, and so I'm not voting for any of these amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Councillor, I'm going to go to Director Kitte. She had her hand up. And then Councillor Cisco.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify a couple of points. We do have design expertise on staff to look at these things. So what we are saying is right now we have a very tightly scoped design review panel that only looks at severances. We are saying we are going to replace that with a more comprehensive pre-consultation process that includes design, including that expertise, as well as expertise from other areas. What we're also saying is we want to take the skills and the design skills and expertise that is in the community and have them working on more community oriented things with an expanded scope. So Councillor Littleton, I hope that assists.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Kitay. So Councillor Cisco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarity's sake, the last paragraph is going to be split off so it can be voted on separately.
Correct.
I will just say I don't see the reasoning or the justification in prolonging the process for these developments. I think this goes to the heart of one of the problems we have. It's timely. It costs money to be able to put together developments, in not just in our community, but in any community. And it seems to me with this duplication that's being proposed in the amended motion, the duplication is going to make the process longer and more costly. So, I mean, I don't see the reasoning for it. I hear many times around the table, council saying we need to trust our staff. Our staff have come forward with, I think, a very good and robust system to be able to take care of council and the community with the original recommendation. So I would just, council not to vote in favor of what is essentially duplication and is going to slow the process down, put more houses into the stock and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cisco. So we have the motion to split. Councillor Kushner, it's not to debate, so I'll allow you to speak, but it's not to debate. It's just really clarifying your position. But if you go into a statement, I'll ask you to be muted again. Councillor Kushner.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question. I brought up the possibility of having pre-consultation with staff and the design review panel at the same time, and I didn't get a response from that.
Okay, so I'll go to Director Kitay and or even the CAO. One of those two.
Can I perhaps I can
Yeah.
give this a shot. Planning and dangerous for a CAO to weigh into these planning matters too specifically, but I'm going to give it a shot here. Staff have looked at the entire process as things go through the department. The design review panel had a very narrow focus previously. However, design review in the application process is something that's very important that they see coming in at the beginning. So they're trying to look at the whole process. And this motion, the way it's amended, takes what was an existing older process that isn't fitting the mold of how we wish things to go through and tries to resurrect and put that expanded there. Staff are trying to have this work well for staff, for input from those in our community that have this expertise, for staff to provide input, and they've designed and sent us a report to say how that would work well. And if we start to piece it apart here now and pick certain parts, it's not going to work holistically together as a whole very well. And I think you're hearing that from the director and Ms. P. Hatch here. So I mean, us trying to figure this out when staff has already designed how they wish this process to go and how they see it working well for the community and staff, it's a holistic thing. It's balancing everything together, and now we're picking apart just one part of it.
Councillor Kushner.
If I can, because the committee, the design review panel has never seen the recommendation, and the feedback that I'm getting is that they don't agree with part of the recommendation. Of course, they agree with the expanded part, the first part. Seems everybody agrees with that. Would it not be appropriate to defer the second portion and refer to them for their comment? Because they're the ones that have the experience, and also there is citizen representation on that committee, which is very important.
Okay, it does say in the second paragraph, Councillor, it does say to consult with the existing DRP and report back to the expanded role. So I don't understand.
Okay, we all agree with that part, Mr. Mayor. Surely there can't be any disagreement with that. But at the same time, the feedback I'm getting is that they agree with the last part. I've talked to the chair of the committee and I've talked to the citizen representative of the committee.
So you've
I
talked to
think-
2 of the 5.
Yes, and with respect to the committee, I think they should be able to take a look at the report and to comment on it.
Okay, so that should come out of the review with the DRC. So I think the third paragraph is redundant. And I think that those comments will come back through the existing DRP since they are going to be consulted with. So I think it's a redundancy that we're looking to take care of. So I'm going to split the motion and I'm going to have through the clerks, if we look at Director Kitte, do you have a question or do you have a comment?
Through the mayor, I wanted to touch on one of Councillor Kushner's questions that hadn't been addressed. The design review panel is actually a committee meeting. Therefore, it requires all of the procedures of a typical committee meeting, including agenda setting, notification to the public, all that type of stuff. So if we were to attach that level onto a pre-consultation process, it's melding two formats that would limit the effectiveness and the scope of discussion that we would need to have on development applications. So that's why we wouldn't pair the 2 of them together. Also, pre-consultations are entirely confidential. These are conversations that take place between staff and the applicant, because at that time, no formal application has been made. Development DRPs are open to the public, so that the applicant is aware that their proposal can be discussed in an open forum. So that's a secondary reason about why we can't hold them at the same time. So if the last paragraph of the amendment were to be passed, it would absolutely create a process deficiency, and staff continue to recommend the recommendation that was in the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Director Kitte. Okay, Councillor Kushner, I'm not going to allow you to speak too many more times. This will be your last time, and then we're going to vote.
Okay, my suggestion would be to refer the last paragraph, which is controversial, as a courtesy to the design review panel for their response.
I'm going to disagree with that just because it should come up during the consultation with the DRC, the existing group. We shouldn't be putting in language about directed to retain the original scope when then it'll have to come back for reconsideration. I'd rather it be part of the consultation with the existing DRP to see if they can come back with a role that includes the original scope that they've been asked to fulfill. And so there's a date there, Councillor. It's the end of 2020. It gives a lot of timeline. I would say if I were in your shoes, I would be taking that out entirely, or it'll just stand for vote.
My reading of that, Mr. Mayor, is quite different than yours. If we change that to consult with the existing DRP with an expanded role, including the original scope, then that would satisfy everything.
Perfect. That's exactly including the 100%.
Okay, expanded role, including the original scope and mandate.
Right. That's perfect.
So therefore, the last paragraph would be withdrawn.
Right. Thank you for allowing for that change, Councillor. Okay. And Director Kitte, do you have any final comments? Your hand was up.
Not at, oh, was it? Sorry, not at this time.
Okay, I think we've had a very thorough discussion on this, so we're not splitting the vote. I'll look to Councillor Sorrento. You had your hand up for this. Are you comfortable in retaining the rest of the motion? Not splitting it, I mean? I'll take that as a yes.
No, Mr. Mayor, I just, my mic
No,
just.
no statements, no statements, Not looking for a statement.
No statement, Mr. Mayor. I was giving you an update. My mic was just unmuted. No, Mr. Mayor, I can't even see the motion on the screen. So can we see it?
Is it not in front of you?
No, it's not. I don't have it in front of me, Mr. Mayor. Maybe I'm having a problem using this. But at any rate, so I can't see it.
Okay, Evan, can you help why Councillor Sorrento can't see it? Can everybody else unmute? Evan, I just want to make sure everyone's seeing the motion.
Yes.
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 Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes, I can see it.
Councillor
Okay.
Sorrento, Evan, can you help Councillor Sorrento?
I can email it to Councilor Sorrento so you can see it that way, but otherwise, troubleshooting right now, not much I can do to help.
Councillor Sorrento, can you explain what's on your screen right now?
I'm just looking at CAO Chemnitz, and then I've got the smaller gallery, the on the bottom row.
Okay, so he's still seeing the gallery. Can you get Councillor, did he press something?
Perhaps we could just describe the change from what he has seen previously.
Okay, Councillor Sorrento, the last paragraph has been struck. And so that's the one that you were concerned about. That's been struck out.
Okay.
The second last paragraph is what you had seen originally. And it is
Okay.
now including an expanded role to include the review of the original scope and mandate. So in consultation with the DRP, that they will look at the expanded role, including the original scope and mandate to be built into a new terms of reference. So that's the second one.
Second
And
one,
then
okay.
And then the first one is obviously to suspend the pilot DRP due to COVID-19 protocols.
Sounds like what's in the report, Mr. Mayor. That's good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks you, Councillor Sorrento. Okay, seeing no other hands up, I'm going to call the question since there is no longer a request for splitting of the motion. The motion will stand as amended, and it has 2 paragraphs to it. To the clerk, I will call the question.
Sorry,
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, sorry. Are we not splitting Councillor Kushner's amendment? Sorry.
No.
We did, but he's removed the last paragraph, which is the one that
Just,
you were concerned about.
okay, fair enough. So Councillor Kushner's amendment is going to be part of the staff recommendation?
Well, he's modified it.
Councilor Sorrento, the motion is in your email now as well. Evan has sent it to you via email.
Okay.
Councilor Kushner,
Yes.
Councilor Littleton,
No.
Councilor Miller,
No,
sorry, was that a no or a yeah?
no, that was a no.
Thank Councilor Phillips,
Yes.
Yes.
Councilor Porter,
Yes.
Councilor Cisco, Councilor Cisco,
Is he on the? Evan, is he on the? Do you see Councillor Cisco on the screen?
Now I'm on mute. Wonderful. No.
Councilor Sorrento,
No.
Councilor Townsend,
Yes.
Councilor Williamson,
Yes.
Councilor Dodge,
Yes.
Councilor Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Harris,
No.
Mayor Senzik,
Yes.
and that's carried.
Okay. Again, I think we'll have a more fulsome discussion about sending in amendments at the last minute. That's been reviewed. Okay, so that was it for our discussion agenda. Thank you very much, Council, for taking us through that. Council's reconvened. Motion to ratify forthwith recommendations. I guess Councilor Garcia to adopt these items approved forthwith by General Committee Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020. And seconding it is his ward mate, Counselor Williamson.
So moved.
So
Okay,
second.
all right. Anyone opposed? Okay, seeing none. The next thing that we have is motions. So we have Councillor Sorrento with the next regular meeting of council, whereas COVID-19 outbreak and the provincial federal emergency declarations, many staff and councillors have been working from home. Therefore, be it resolved, the council approve the next meeting of council meeting be rescheduled from Monday, May 4th, 6:30 to Wednesday, May 6th at 2:30. Be it further resolved that staff provide appropriate notice to public and the media. And Councillor Sorrento, you have with the motion,
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
seconded by Councillor Littleton. Okay. Anyone opposed to this? Okay, all in favor? Carried.
Yes.
Special meeting, so we've removed that from the agenda. Time change for the April 27th Budget Standing Committee, and that's scheduled for Monday, April 27th at 4:30, be rescheduled to Monday, April 27th at 2:30. I got Councillor Cisco making the motion. Yes,
So moved.
seconded by Councillor Littleton. Okay, anyone opposed to that change? Okay, seeing none. 10.4, issues of debentures. So we have a motion on the floor, whereas it is deemed desirable to issue debentures in the amount. Evan, do you want to put this one on the screen for the public? And I believe this is being moved by Councillor Cisco and seconded by Councillor Littleton. And I'll just go to Director Douglas, if she just wants to just give a 30-second what this is for the public.
Your worship, what we're requesting from council is this is a formal approval to be granted for the city to have the region of Niagara to issue debentures on our behalf for projects that were previously approved in various capital budgets for capital works that have been completed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Garcia, got a question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the director just asked to answer it, but just to confirm, so this was a planned issue of debentures and we're just doing it now. This is nothing to do with the shortfall due to, or cash flow due to the pandemic.
Through you, your worship, yes, these were previously approved debenture projects for capital projects that were previously approved.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Garcia. And we have the motions on the floor. Look to the deputy clerk for a recorded vote.
Councillor Cisco,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend,
Yeah.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yeah.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Mayor Senzik,
Yes.
and that's carried.
Okay, thank you, Councillor, for that. 10.5, amendment to procedural bylaw, reason to pull items from consent, and this is coming from Councillor Williamson.
Thank you. Whereas it is in the public interest to discuss civic issues openly and responsibly, and whereas effectively serving the common good is enhanced by including multiple perspectives, and whereas an important part of the councilor's role is to reflect grassroots points of view and add accountability in a legislative process by creating new and amending existing bylaws, and whereas council's decision on July the 11th, 2016 deprived councilors of the long-held prerogative to pull items forward for discussion unless the staff recommendation is being amended, significantly curtails councilors' ability to perform their responsibilities under the pretext of efficiency. Therefore, be it resolved that bylaw 2015-170 as amended, being the City of St. Catharines procedural bylaw, be amended so that section B18 restores council members' ability to bring forward consent items for discussion without restriction. And be it further resolved that the city solicitor be prepared to prepare the necessary bylaw. And I'll just go ahead and speak to it, not reserve my right to speak last. If you believe city councilors deserve fair treatment and degree of respect in our role representing citizens in local government, you will support this change. If you believe local representatives should not be limited in our ability to question and be involved in overseeing the decision-making process, you will support this motion. If you believe in openness, inclusivity, transparency, accountability, and in the freedom of speech, you will vote to affirm the removal of this unnecessary restriction on what gets discussed at council meetings. If you believe city council meetings are democratic public forums where citizens can listen and watch meaningful debate and discussion, then you will vote yes. If you believe it is better to share power and authority with elected representatives as opposed to concentrating this responsibility with a few people, you'll also agree with this change. If you believe it is important that civic issues be thoroughly vetted and more voices be considered before bylaws are enacted, you will support this motion. Some will surely attempt to argue that this is an innocuous provision and it's not an impediment to fulsome debate. However, those of us who have had the experience serving on council before this restriction was imposed know that it's clearly a limit on our deliberations. And some of us were even around before we had a consent agenda. I do like the idea of a consent agenda because there's lots of routine items that should get passed. Also, I haven't had a chance to do a whole lot of research, but does not seem to be a practice that's used in too many other municipalities, and the people that I consulted with were kind of surprised about it. And further, I don't expect, like it was the way it was treated in the past, I don't think this to be a routine thing where we're going to regularly pull things. And I think we, respect goes both ways. I think councillors should use good discretion. I think most councillors in the past did and give fair warning to staff. So to me, this would be the exception to the rule as it was before 2016. I think we also have to remember that councillors we are part-time. It's a part-time position, and sometimes we get requests from residents over the weekend before a Monday night meeting. We used to have Monday night meetings, or new information comes to the fore. So it's about giving us a little bit of flexibility to be able to bring something forward without actually having to go through the process of amending it. So thank you for listening, and I appreciate your support.
All right, so we have Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, while I'm all for transparency and accountability and all that, I guess I want to understand, why was the amendment to section B18 put in place back in 2015, I believe, or 2016?
So I'll go to Bonnie, the city clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, it was put in place for very specifically because our meetings tended to go extremely long. Motions and recommendations were being pulled. Oftentimes, reports would get referred because of the length of the meeting, or referred because more discussion needed to be had, which was fine. But then they would sometimes come back at another time, and it was very difficult to try and fit them in a meeting where we had the amount of time we needed to discuss them. So what happened was, we talked about this for a good length of time, and we decided to try this process. And in fact, I think I sent you all an email prior to this to just say that this process is one actually that I do talk a lot about with my colleagues, to say it's a process that works extremely well. And it still offers councillors the opportunity to pull a report and refer it if they get last minute information. And it still allows councillors to pull reports by Friday at 4:30. So, but that's why we put it in.
Councillor Townsend.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess one concern I would have is that while I'm in agreement, sometimes we do have consent. It's very rare, but sometimes we have consent reports that do come out last minute and late. I'm wondering if does the policy, does it, if a consent report is, say, added late, can a counselor pull it, say, going into a Monday meeting before a meeting?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the counselor, if a report comes in late, it would either go on on discussion because council wouldn't have had adequate time, or the public have had adequate time to review the report, or we would definitely, if it was, it could definitely be pulled and referred. That's always open to council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I have concerns with this because when I come to meet, I like to be prepared when I come to a meeting, and as we've seen, there are some times where it is challenging to prepare right on the spot. I like to do some research, so I'm wondering if maybe if it's an opportunity where maybe we can change it to like a 24-hour period or something. Maybe if Councillor Williamson would see that fitting. I do think it is fair to give some type of notification so that staff can actually prepare some of the information we might be looking for.
Okay, Councillor Williamson, there's been a request. I don't know
Yeah,
if you're.
thank you. I won't receive that as friendly. The counselor can make it, of course.
Okay,
like I said,
you don't
yeah,
need to
correct.
expand on it. Thank you.
Thank
Okay, Councillor Townsend, are you finished?
I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. I got Councillor Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly agree with the motion. I agree with staff that it's more convenient for staff, but it's not. It doesn't give our constituents the opportunity to hear the debate and to hear the questions. Many times we have questions, and after the questions, we don't want to make amendments, but the questions are very important. And I would think that staff would be as prepared to answer the questions that are on forthcoming from consent as they would be from discussion items. And as a courtesy, I would think most of us, when we have questions, we do call staff with an indication of what our questions will be, and then we may repeat them at council, not for our edification, but for our residents. So I fully support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Sorrento.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just looking at the whereas clauses, so you're just going to see my picture here. So in the councillor's motion here, so whereas clause number 1, we already do this. We're already open and responsive. We're already doing what is in whereas clause number 2. Okay, plenty of opportunity for input. The councillor's role to reflect grassroots, accountability, transparency. I believe that's already in the act. Okay, so I don't see how pulling a consent report is going to enhance this at all. And then finally, with the final whereas clause, the last one before the therefore be it resolved, Mr. Mayor, some of the councillors will remember that during the last term of council, consent reports were being pulled left, right, and center. And the meetings were going wrong, very, very long. Staff were falling behind in their work, Mr. Mayor. And another point is that regarding reports, Mr. Mayor, there is an onus and a responsibility on each and every councillor to read the agenda items in advance, not last minute. And I don't know if this is the case or what. Okay. And as the clerk said, if there is something that's last minute, we can always defer. So we have an obligation to do, and I believe Councillor Townsend said this too, we have an obligation to prepare well in advance. Now, throughout my tenure on council, I've never been asked once about a consent report. I've been asked about many discussion reports, Mr. Mayor. Okay. And, you know, the clerk sent us an email outlining the reasons why, you know, we shouldn't go down this road. And no disrespect to the constituents, because we are in touch with them. They have every opportunity to participate in this. We have every opportunity to call staff in advance. I've been doing that since day one, a week in advance, 2 weeks in advance. But when this gets railroaded, Mr. Mayor, is when something is pulled at the last moment. And I don't want to see that happen because that will turn into a nightmare. So with the greatest respect to everybody, there's no way I'm supporting this. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to comment, my comments follow along the lines of what Councillor Kushner had to say. I do find that, that we get, sometimes we get questions from residents very close to the meeting. And we weren't ready to pull with a recommendation before we got those. I totally understand what the clerk said in terms of what the intent was, but I think Councillor Williamson is right that we are all responsible and we are not going to use this ability to pull indiscriminately. We're going to do it when we need it occasionally. And, there could be reports that that are in consent and councillors feel that it's imperative that they be in public discussion for the public to hear. So I do support what Councillor Williamson is trying to do. And I think the amendment that Councillor Townsend put in with the 24 hours is more than sufficient and should ameliorate any concerns that people have. And yes, I realize that every now and then we have late meetings, but I think that's the exception. And we're elected to represent the people. And if we have to be late at some meetings, that's our responsibility. So I will certainly support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. Councillor Harris. Councillor Harris?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess my question, it's through you, Mr. Mayor, to the clerk. So, I do have a little bit of a problem with the word, you have to pull something with the word amendment, because sometimes you don't actually know. And sometimes there are the odd thing that at the last moment, a constituent wants you to actually have a conversation at council about. But I guess my question to the clerk is if something does come up that perhaps is on the consent and it's not pulled in time, is there not a mechanism in our procedures that we could actually ask to waive the rules and get the rest of council to support us pulling something off the consent?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, you can always waive the rules. That's always in your procedures. So yes.
Councillor Harris?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I guess my statement is if we are looking at the consent agenda and there's things that might be contentious or something, it's up to us to kind of make sure we pull it. I do have a problem with the word amendment because maybe we pull it and we don't actually need to have an amendment. We just want to have a conversation. But ultimately, even if there are these rules or whatever, we could always waive the rules, as the clerk said. So I don't really see a need for this. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Harris. We had Councillor Phillips, Councillor Cisco, and I think Councillor Littleton or Porter had their hand up. Councillor Phillips.
Yeah, I'm going to support the motion. I mean, I'm sure councillors, if they're going to pull something, I recommend obviously they do it the week before, if as would be the norm. And if something did get pulled and they weren't sure of the intent, they could always ask to defer it, as has been the option in the past. But this gives us a chance to speak to an issue, as Councillor Williamson mentioned. If something came up on the weekend for whatever reason, and I don't know what it might be, prior to a council meeting, we can simply ask for it to be pulled. I don't believe it's going to extend the length of time of meetings very long. I don't believe that causes our meetings in the first place. I don't believe that's why that was brought in necessarily to shorten our meetings, because it's not going to happen very often.
staff do a good job in determining which goes into consent and which goes into discussion. And rarely would consent need to be pulled. But every once in a while, I do believe it should be able to happen without having to do anything else and other than just asking for it to be pulled. So I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Go to Councillor Porter.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess to the mover, and if I've looked at some of the other procedural bylaws of other cities and why they seem a little bit more general. The intent of pulling something from consent is to debate it. It's not just to ask questions and talk about it. It's you actually have to have a debate. So that's why, to me, it makes sense that you would have to, you disagree with the motion inside it, and then you'd be wanting to amend the staff recommendation. So I'm not following along. And then I guess if people have, if residents have questions, you know, can't we email staff and try to get the answers? If you beforehand, I worry about these items getting pulled and the meetings going on for a long time, and it's talking, and I think you need to have a specific reason, and then it is the clerk's job to decide what goes on into consent and what goes into discussion. And to me, there hasn't really been, I'm just wondering if the mover thinks there's been an issue where the clerk's office has maybe put things into the consent item that he thinks should be in discussion, and there needs to be a review of that. I personally don't see that. I'm just wondering if the mover could comment, or Councillor Williamson could comment on that as well. So when you say you want to pull something, is it for an actual debate because you disagree, or do you just want to talk about it?
Sometimes it could be, sorry, am I on?
Yes.
You can hear me. Okay, thank you. Sometimes it could be for debate, as Councillor Phillips said, and some Councillor Kushner, and maybe even Councillor Garcia. A council meeting isn't supposed to be a choreographed, you know, rehearsed event. It's supposed to be something that's somewhat dynamic, and not everything is preordained and decided beforehand. It should be a situation where we have, you know, fulsome debates and points are brought up, and sometimes items that go on consent, and it's I'm sure that the clerk, the large majority of the time, has chosen events, chosen issues that go on the consent agenda. Today, Councillor Kushner pulled the design review committee and he made a giant amendment. Maybe he could have just brought that forward without any kind of amendment to begin with if we didn't have this rule in place. I don't know if he would have or he wouldn't have, but having experienced the other way, there was rarely a councillor who took advantage of it and didn't really give staff a heads up in advance. And I think because we're conditioned to have this consent agenda now, I think we will treat staff with respect like we have. And, you know, I think the respect thing goes both ways. I think council has a role to play in making bylaws. And we sometimes have perspectives that are a little different than people that work at City Hall. And I'd be interested to know if you found any other municipalities that actually had this restriction.
I'm back. The overwhelming majority, I haven't done a ton of research, but it's really for debate. So I still believe I feel that I have the ability to pull motions from anything from consent, any report. I don't feel restricted, and I think forcing an amendment makes you question why you're doing this in the first place. And I appreciate it, and I think it focuses our discussion and conversation. You actually have to think about it in advance a little bit. So I appreciate what you're trying to say, but I don't feel the same way about it. So I won't be supporting this because I do think it's important to have a reason to pull, and that reason should be because we disagree or we want to have a debate, and so there should be some kind of amendment. Otherwise, otherwise we end up talking And I don't like to have long meetings for no reason. And I still, again, I haven't seen an issue with what's been put in consent, and I think the clerk's office does a good job. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Cisco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I find the idea that people feel limited or that speech is limited by the way the procedural bylaws currently operating to be kind of nonsensical. And Councillor Porter kind of made that point a minute ago. Every councillor has the ability to pull a report. It's not difficult. It's a simple email. The only restriction is that the clerk's office would like it by 4:30. It has to be in by 4:30 on the Friday. By that point, if you don't know that you're pulling something, the reality is there's probably no reason to pull it. Now, I've heard a couple of people say, well, council wouldn't have used this. And I mean, I don't see why there would be a problem. But I mean, if you were on council in the last term, the first 2 years, give or take, were very long meetings. At one point, I think we went past curfew 5 or 6 meetings in a row. And we were bogged down, and there were, I mean, media reports talking about how St. Catharines City Council couldn't seem to get its act together, and it was going to be problematic throughout the term. And it was specifically because people were pulling reports constantly to discuss them at the last minute. I struggle to see why this is a requirement. If people want to be able to speak about a report to the community, we have multiple communications channels. We can go on Cogeco at 6 p.m. beforehand. Councillors are able to go in and speak about reports that they think are of interest to their ward or the community at large. We have lots of other communication channels, social media and the like. So there's lots of opportunities. In looking at the way the report currently, or sorry, the way the bylaw currently exists, Section 18 that Councillor Williamson's motion would change simply says that you need to bring forward a motion, you have to, if you're bringing forward a motion, you have to be changing the recommendation. But that makes sense because otherwise it's really just to talk about it. And again, there are other communications channels for that. As well, if you're bringing it forward simply so that you can be voting in opposition of the motion, you can always ask to be noted opposed in the first place. If this is a matter of residents bringing up issues on the weekend, it's a simple matter of an email or a phone call back to the resident with the information they asked for. It doesn't require stopping the meeting or bringing things forward at the last minute. And I mean, we've seen during this meeting what happens when people bring changes and amendments and new ideas, you know, that they haven't brought forward at any other point. I mean, there is spontaneity that happens, but wholesale changing motions and changing recommendations, it makes it very difficult for the rest of council to be able to deal with that. We saw that a couple months ago with a motion that was brought at the last minute that didn't really have the prep time required for it with the cannabis debate. There's not a good reason to make these changes. Nobody's speech is being limited. The reality is every single councillor can pull anything off of consent at any point up to 4:30 on the Friday before a meeting. That's plenty of time. And if councillors have done their due diligence and they've done the prep work in advance, they know what they want to bring forward. If a resident has concerns, they can address those concerns without having to make major changes to the agenda in the middle of the agenda. And as Councillor Harris brought forward, and it's 100% correct, at the end of the day, if there was something really so urgent and pressing that nobody was aware of until the meeting, we can always waive or suspend the rules. So I don't think we change the procedural bylaw for something which, as has been stated by a couple of people in support of the motion, something that would be so rare. We don't change the procedural bylaw for something that's so rare that we could use the suspension of the rules to be able to deal with it effectively. So I'll be opposed to this, and I think we should all be opposed, because as much as I respect my colleagues, and I believe that I want to believe that everybody would use this sparingly, we have several years of results before this change was made, where we had meetings going hours and hours, and really with no purpose except to eventually bog down staff. So I would hope that we could see fit to defeat this and move on.
Thank you, Councillor Cisco. I got Councillor Littleton.
I think that what Councillor Cisco said, and Councillor Harris before him as well, Councillor Porter as well, I do feel that they've said everything that I do want to say, except for the fact that I'm going to say something because I feel that the way that the motion was put forward in terms of, if you believe in this, you will vote for this. If you believe in this, that, I don't get offended very often, but I found that that kind of language is offensive because I do believe in free speech. I do believe in residents having their say, and I feel that we have that right now. There is nothing in our procedural bylaw, because we have a consent agenda, that prevents residents from speaking their minds, from bringing up issues, from communicating with counselors. There is nothing that prevents any of that from happening. As my fellow colleagues have just said, we have ample opportunities to pull items from consent. We had an example of it not an hour ago, where a counselor felt that he wanted to make a change to something and wanted to have a discussion about it, and we did so. And so to suggest that this is being curtailed, I don't think is accurate. So I don't see the need to change what's been doing. I think the fact that staff has told us that the reason why the change was made is because people did abuse it, did have meetings that were outrageously long and bogged down the actual business of council and the actual business of staff, is the exact reason why we have this change that was made. I don't think that that's wrong. I think that that's why the change was made. And I would be so nervous to go back to that, because I think we have so much work, so much important work that has to be done. I would be very reluctant to allow that to go off the rails, particularly now with this pandemic. So I will not support this motion for that reason. And I think that right now it works. And I'll be the first one that if somebody moving forward says, you know what, I didn't have enough time on the weekend, or there was X number of residents that brought this up to me and I didn't have time to pull it by 4:30, can we suspend the rules for this one item on consent because I want to discuss it? Happy to do so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Littleton. And so anyone else that hasn't spoken yet? If not, I'll just wait to see. Pretty much everyone else has had an opportunity. Okay, so I do appreciate the balance of comments that have been made. I think, I want to make sure I'm unmuted. I think the intent of the procedural change that was made was to ensure both respecting of staff and council that they had ample opportunity to address an issue that may be coming. So that was an important thing. And I think for those councillors who were on the previous council, you'll note that when that change was made, of which council agreed to the change, the meetings became more, they became more focused. And you know, the tenets, as Councillor Williamson is a teacher of history and government, the foundation of Canada is peace, order, and good government. Good government isn't static; it's constantly evolving. And I think the relying on, well, if nobody else does it, then why do we do it, is in fact an error in thinking. I think we got to look at this, and we made a decision last term of council to make a modification that actually increased the ability for council to actually do its job and do it effectively. And in doing so, created better government. And so you've heard from councillors that you can pull motions you can pull reports on the day of, it gets referred to the next council meeting, or you can ask for the rules to be waived. There is no curtailing of democracy or lack of transparency, all these catchphrases that we use. The reality is that this is about respecting both staff and other councillors. So I think this is, if we can put this, if we defeat this motion today, we can review the procedural bylaw in its totality when we come out of COVID-19 and see if we can, as Councillor Townsend pointed out, see if we can fine tune it even better. But changing it right now in the middle of a crisis, I think is counter to what good government looks like and should be doing. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll call the question.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
Counselor Dodge,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
No.
Counselor Kushner,
Yes.
Counselor Littleton,
No.
Counselor Miller,
Yes.
Counselor Phillips,
Yes.
Counselor Porter,
No.
Counselor Cisco,
No.
Counselor Sorrento,
No,
Counselor Townsend,
Yes.
you flip.
Mayor Sendzik,
No.
and that's carried.
Okay, thank you for that. I hope the counselors that did make the comment about not abusing it will follow through on that for this term of council.
Six, seven, yeah. Six.
Okay, so where are we on the agenda? Notice of motion. Are there any notices of motion? Don't see any. Councilor Williamson, do you have another one you want to put on the table? No?
No, thanks.
Any report request? Okay, seeing none. Motion to read the bylaw, Councilor Porter?
I didn't know I was doing this. Yes, a motion to put forward the bylaws as of Wednesday, April 22nd.
Okay, so the bylaws listed A through M be read a first time, considered and passed, and then signed by the mayor and city clerk, and that's seconded by Councilor Cisco. Okay, all in favor? I'll look to the deputy clerk to record the vote.
Counselor Porter,
Yes.
Counselor Cisco,
Yes.
Counselor Serrano,
Yes,
Counselor Townsend,
Yes.
Counselor Williamson,
Yes.
Counselor Dodge,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Harris, Counselor Harris, Evans,
Yes.
Counselor Kushner,
Yes.
Counselor Littleton,
Yes.
Counselor Miller,
Yes.
Counselor Phillips,
Yes.
Mayor Sendzik, can you unmute Mayor Sendzik?
Any
Sorry.
updates from ABCs? Okay, seeing none, a motion to adjourn, Councilor Kushner?
So moved, Mr. Mayor. So moved.
Okay, Councilor, can I have a seconder?
Yes.
Councilor Harris, all in favor? Carried? Okay, have a good meeting. Thank you very much. Take care.
Yep.
Bye-bye.